So this is the 22:50 UK time, 21:50 GMT on Sunday, the 26th of March 2023. This is part B of the Khoodeelaar television channel, being broadcast under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo Editions. This is part B, and we are going to hopefully continue with some of the updates due. Now, that logo where the baby angel Geronimo's face is normally shown is the logo of the StreamYard company. And we have not been able to make contacts with the bank as to what particular communications needed to be made in order to register the transaction that has not been effected. That is the explanation as to why they have reduced this account to basic, because that is the level at which the normal professional fees are due but not have been paid. So we are going to do that during the week starting tomorrow, Monday the 27th of March. So, but the essential banner, Baby Angel Geronimo editions, are in the text of the program. Now, we did discuss the number of issues that included, of course, the role of Boris Johnson, but what we didn't discuss in part A today was Patrick Coburn's piece had a decline of Metropolitan Police indicative of degradation of British state. Now, Patrick Coburn is the son of one of the sons of the journalist Alexander Coburn. Alexander Coburn and his wife, Patricia Coburn, played a significant kind of, how shall I say, patriotic parts in publishing the short-lived publication, The Week. It's not The Week that is currently doing business as a commercial one. That was the original Week published by Claude Coburn, not Alexander Coburn. Claude Coburn and his wife Patricia. Alexander is, of course, one of the sons. This one is Patrick Coburn, who is a writer on the I newspaper. And the headline is completely unacceptable because it says decline of Met indicative of degradation of British state. Now, for a start, I mean, for a Coburn to say the British state as if it was ever in a moral state is totally inconsistent with the tradition which we recognize left behind by his parents, Claude Coburn and Patricia Coburn. I have been a student of the Coburns, the original Coburns, since I came across the column that was published in Private Lie under Claude Coburn's name. I got interested in finding out about him, and then the enquiries I made showed that he and his wife were a pair of one-offs, if you like. The likes of them do not exist in the British media today. So it was Claude Coburn and Patricia Coburn. And as an investigative journalist, investigator, campaigner myself, I do find it interesting to know about the Cobans. So this one is the decline of the mat indicative of degradation of British state. Now, it's not degradation. The word that I would use and I have been using in describing the likes of the British state, so called, is degeneration. And the British state, degradation of British state, that phase, that phrase actually shows that this Patrick Coburn piece is sympathetic of the status quo of the British state. Now, that is not the case. Well, that should not be the case because the decline of metropolitan police again is wrong. It's corruption. The corruption of the London Metropolitan Police is new. And when I said the corruption of the Metropolitan Police, I don't mean really, I don't mean any nameable police individual because I don't know anyone who I can name as a police person because I have no contact, never have had any contact with any police person that I could name. Essentially, my concern has been the state, the extent, the depth of corruption into which the policing of London has been sinking with undeniable degeneration being caused in the wake of the descent into corruption, the depths of corruption. And I see no platform in the United Kingdom today, neither in the British Parliament, UK Parliament, nor in any regional assemblies, nor in any of the newspapers that supposedly are independently produced and researched and whatever, including The Guardian, including The Times, because as I have said many times, the Times newspaper is the only one that in the 1960s, late 1960s, kind of dared to publish based on investigations the question as to this fall of Scotland Yard. That is what they call it. The London Metropolitan Police is called Scotland Yard, into which mystery we shall not go in this edition, but we shall do in due course in later or other editions. What has happened is that the idea of the policing or the idea of policing that has been vaunted, has been kind of promoted in the United Kingdom by the so-called mass media is that it is unique, is high standard, and it's almost ethical, as it is, or it has been, or used to be, described as policing by consent. Now, there are so many stories, news stories, real news stories that have begun to be kind of put on the mainstream media, especially after the two things. One was the actual kidnapping, rape, murder, and the burning of Sarah Everard, and also the mass police attack on the protesters that had been trying to express solidarity with and honor Sarah Everard few weeks after. And Sarah Everard's arrest, kidnapping, murder, rape, burning has now been expressed as a tip of the iceberg, especially in relation to the publication of what they call the Casey Review. And on the internet 3 days ago, this is the one that I'm in kind of retrieving. There are the Casey Review on Met Police. When you put that on the search kind of website, you Google these 5 words, it produces the first one, it produces reads, the review described sexist attitudes towards the very few female firearms officers and reported officers being granted immunity and even encouraged to break rules. The Casey Review suggests that the institutional sexism in the Met doesn't just affect officers, but also the women who need the Met's services. Now, this entry, whoever wrote this, is a completely dishonest, corrupt, criminally contemptuous distortion of the reality. And according to the conversation.com, which says Casey Review, how different is the Met Police from the UK's other forces? And is published on the 23rd of March, 4:05 p.m. GMT. And it reads, the first paragraph reads, the series of scandals that has hit the UK's biggest police force suggests long-standing and serious underlying problems. The newly published Casey Review details these problems in depth, adding another strain to the Metropolitan Police's reputation. The report found that institutional misogyny, racism, and homophobia are rampant throughout the Metropolitan Police. The organization's recruitment and vetting is weak, and the internal processes fail to adequately tackle poor performance. This again is very weak and racist itself, because racism is the main persistence of corruption by and through and in the London Metropolitan Police. Sexism comes next. But how different is the Met from the 44 other police forces in England and Wales? The Met generally deals with more violent offences such as murder and robbery than other forces. It also has the highest percentage of firearms operations and the highest number of firearms officers. Firearms roles are seen as the most prestigious and lucrative jobs in the force, and it is these specialist units where the Casey Review identified some of the worst cultures, behaviors, and practices in terms of bullying, racism, and sexism, and found that normal rules do not seem to apply or be applied. Newcomers to these groups often have to adapt to these established toxic cultural norms if they want to succeed. The review described sexist attitudes towards the very few female firearms officers and reported officers being granted immunity and even encouraged to break rules. In recent years, there has been an explosion in the number of offenses being reported that predominantly affect women, including domestic abuse and rape. Currently, only 30% of the Metropolitan Police's workforce is female, less than the national average of 34%, 34.9% in police forces. Other forces fare a little better in comparison with West Yorkshire Police having 42% of its workforce as female, one of the highest in the country. At leadership levels, there is an even greater discrepancy between the genders. 76% of the Met's chief inspectors are male. This is higher than most other forces, as 70% of Greater Manchester Police and 64% West Midlands Police chief inspectors are male. And so this is the kind of thing it is doing, but it is, notice it's not focusing on racism. And there is this heading to a section that follows, which is towards ethnic diversity. Fuck off. It should be about racism, you fucking racists. So I'm not going to read the rest of the conversation, which is itself a racist thing. This is a very curious paragraph here. Notice I'm going to read this just to emphasize the linguistic and conceptual contradiction. However, it should be noted that many ethnic minorities often believe that ethnic minority officers continue to represent an institutionally racist organization, regardless of background. And research from the United States finds inconclusive evidence of the effectiveness of diversity drives in decreasing police violence towards ethnic minorities. Now, this is the contradiction because the research from the US, I mean, why are they imposing research from the US? True, in America, racism and racist attitude and violence against black people is very remarkably high indeed. So it warrants mention. But to base this article on research from the USA is completely diversionary and misinforming because it should be talking about research from the United Kingdom or in the United Kingdom. So the next point is headed losing trust. It might be easy for other forces to distance themselves from criticism of the Metropolitan Police and claim that the issues are specific to one organization. But the Casey report should serve as a warning sign to other forces that they too need to rid themselves of all and any institutional sexism and racism. Just over half of Londoners perceive the Met as a reliable institution. Trust in the police has eroded nationwide. Almost half of the population state that do no longer trust police officers. Trust once lost can be hard to restore. The case report states that not all forces are fully cognizant of the risks these issues pose to their reputation. At the core of the policing mandate is a duty to protect the public. Protecting officers who continue to perpetuate a sexist and bigoted culture is an anathema to this. Policing needs to change so that it attracts the right people for the job and can show the public that they are and can show the public that they are deserving of their trust. Now, this is a lame, ignorant, and stupid piece by this thing called the conversation.com. Now, on every aspect of policing, the London Metropolitan Police, which has got the largest number of the people in the demography that it supposedly is supposed to be protecting and serving, the Metropolitan Police is dysfunctioning on every level, on every aspect. How is this doing? Well, how is this doing the dysfunctioning is a more complicated kind of question which warrants very detailed answers factually. The easier perceptional level of the query is, why is this happening? And the answer is contextually in the wider social framework. There is tolerance, there is very high, dangerously high acceptance by society of police criminality, police crime, police negligence, and police systematically attacking women and black people they're supposed to treat as highly respectable and highly warranting and highly deserving of the support by the police. The idea of policing is claimed to be something that Britain has brought to the world. It is not true at all. And further investigation can be made and the actual evidence brought to the fore to show that policing has been there as long as society has been there. The only difference being that the policing that we know today as uniform police with a kind of organization that is structured in all the countries in the world is a new kind of arrangement. But the concept of policing, that is society needing police, or policing that is monitoring, auditing, holding to account, is not new at all and is not unique, and most certainly not something that Britain has brought for the benefit of the world. Britain doesn't. As is shown by any examination of the evidence of the behavior of the British state and its agencies, will show that the British state and its agencies do not have any respect for the people of the world. That is number one. Number two is that there is no mechanism, democratic, ethical, moral, transparency, and accountability mechanism in place anywhere to hold the police to account. So, if there were any accountability mechanism, say for 2 years, 3 years, before when cousins were able to hijack, kidnap, rape, murder, and burn Sarah Everard, Sarah Everard would be still alive. The fact that she was kidnapped, she was capable of being kidnapped in London by a police person wearing all the police gadgets and carrying all the police kind of symbols, and that this person went about doing the series of serious attacks and violence against the most innocent Sarah Everard shows that he knew that he would not be held to account, he would not be even stopped, even if somebody else showed, sorry, even if some other police person at the time that Cousins was engaged in the attacks on Sarah Everard, even if another police person saw when Cousins at work in attacking Sarah Everard. So all the descriptions that have been published since the facts have been admitted by Cousins, and he has not admitted all the facts about how and what he did to Sarah Everard. All these items of admission and confession have been treated as run of the mills or run of the mill events by the mainstream media and by the police and by the members of parliament. Nobody has said that the police or policing in the UK doesn't exist anymore, which is what our campaign has been saying for the last few years. And the reason why we have been saying this is nothing to do with any agenda on our part about the police. The only reason we have said what we have said and what we are saying with increasing evidence supporting what we have been saying is because the evidence is there. The evidence is there. And this series of comments that are coming out on the Twitter kind of posts, there are thousands and thousands of cases, thousands of incidents of police corruption, police misconduct that are being published online by many people who are identifiable, and they include those who are not necessarily identifiable. The essential common factor is that the police, according to the description, the most of the people that are coming out and coming out either with their own name or coming out without disclosing their names, but disclosing true, essential evidence of police misconduct against individuals, mainly women, and then the second category is the black people, African and Asian background people. And the other point that I have to make about the policing in the context of London is it is a curious name. God, how did she end up with a name like Cressida Dick? I mean, when she was appointed commissioner at the expense of the London policing population, Cressida Dick was intentionally promoted to the highest stratosphere of praise, admiration. And here we are, after she was forced to resign under the weight of the evidence of her failure, and she has gone quiet, except on some occasions she issues statements explaining and excusing her failures, I think, in effect. And I would say that the policing has failed, has stopped being policing when the society collectively was perceived by the policing interests, if you like, the policing bureaucratic interests and lobbies, which noticed that the so-called elected parliament and the elected local councils, including all the councils in the, let's say, 45 police areas, that the reason why the policing as a objective concept of the service to protect the people and to detect crime and to do so transparently with the consent of the people in the demography. All of this has vanished. And neither the parliament centrally nor the local councils has been seen to be even awake while this was happening. So Patrick Coburn's headline, "A Decline of the Metropolitan Police Indicative of Degradation of British State," is completely obsolete. Because to call it decline shows that there has been a place and a time when there was acceptably high level of safety for the ordinary people being policed. There has never been. The UK state and all its agencies are operated on behalf of a small section of the population. That section of the population somehow, hundreds of years ago, grabbed hold of the main levers of power in society. And accordingly, on an annual basis almost, that section of the population, which is a very small section, started to initiate legislation. In other words, to make laws. And it initiated legislation and made laws that are intended to serve the interests of themselves as the status quo in perpetuity. So that has been going on for, let's say, nearly 200 years. Let's check how long the London Metropolitan Police is supposed to have been in existence for. Let's check what the Wikipedia entry tells us. The Metropolitan Police Service, it's called police service. It's not really a police service at all. It is a police force. So let's read this kind of paragraph. The Metropolitan Police Service, MPS, formerly and still commonly known as the Metropolitan Police and informally as the Met Police, the Met, Scotland Yard, or the Yard, is the territorial police force and the prevention of crime in Greater London. Now, people can in their own time, read the whole piece at length. Now, I'm only going to read a bit more and then resume the commentary. In addition, is responsible for some specialized matters throughout the United Kingdom, including national terrorism, specific people, clerk and other members of the government and other officials. The Metropolitan Police Service was founded in 1829. 29 is 100 years, and this is just under 200 by Peter Peel, Robert Peel, sorry, not Peter, under the Metropolitan Police Act 1829. And on 29th of September of that year, that is 1829, 10 years later, Metropolitan Police Act 1839 consolidated policing within London by expanding the Metropolitan Police District and either abolishing or amalgamating the various other law enforcement entities within London into the Metropolitan Police, such as the Thames River Police and the Bow Street Runners. Governance. Since January 2012, the Mayor of London is responsible for the governance of the Metropolitan Police through the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. It's an entry. This is an entry on Wikipedia, and it's a completely, because of the corrupt role that Wikipedia plays in perpetuating lies and myths at the expense of ordinary people, at the expense of the main demography. All the descriptions and references in this entry on Wikipedia about the police are bureaucratic, dishonest, diversionary, tokenistic descriptions. So we shall not be reading the contents of the Wikipedia entry at length. What we shall be doing is talking about the police, and I'll go back to the 1976 series of things that took place in the Leman Street, London E1, where the Tower Hamlets police was actually based as headquartered in the Leman Street Leman Street, which is not far from the Aldgate East station, the underground, and not far from the Tower of London. The Leman Street police held what was given the banner name of Police Community Liaison Meetings. And if I remember correctly, these meetings took place either every 6 weeks or a similar interval. And nobody knew who the people invited to attend it were selected by. I was selected based on the attendance that I had at various public meetings, I think, because nobody actually consulted me as a consultation as to whether I wanted to attend these police community liaison events. As I have described before, the police committee liaison was not a community respecting outlet. It was a tokenistic, bureaucratic operation, and it was chaired by a man called Chief Inspector or Chief Superintendent John Wallis, who would chair the meeting in full uniform and who would not allow the meeting to become a democratic exercise. He conducted the chairing of the event in order to create the appearance of there having been a meeting, and he discouraged any kind of democratic open discussion about policing in Tower Hamlets. John Wallis preferred the attendance of a man who is now deceased, of course, who was referred to by the Siloti speaking Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets as uncle. Now, this man was illiterate and had been living in Tower Hamlets in the east end of London since he jumped ship. He was a seaman, but he was a seaman who was rare because he was a seaman from non-Siloti area. Seamen in Bangladesh are carrying out or have been carrying out, continuing the tradition of servility. And this man was illiterate and was totally servile. He was the real Uncle Tom. So, Chief Inspector or Chief Superintendent Wallis, in his completely mechanical minutes about the meetings after the meetings were held, would refer to this uncle as if of all the people that attended these events, this man called Malik, Uncle Malik, was the most intelligent. He wasn't. His role was as a planted spy in the community. As a result of that, many people who were in the post-colonial period in the 1960s, 70s became unable to settle in Tower Hamlets or in the United Kingdom without the due immigration papers, etc., etc., were forced to approach him, and whatever he took in return for giving advice and protection did come without any interruption. So Malik, Uncle Malik, would be given all kinds of credible statements in the so-called records of the minutes that John Wallis circulated in the next available meetings of what happened, supposedly happened in the previous meetings, which was a fantasy. Malik didn't say any of those things that were positively being described by John Wallis in the records. Malik was incapable of saying those things. But to the mind of Chief Inspector or Chief Superintendent John Wallis, however stupid, however meaningless, however incoherent, however irrelevant what Malik spewed, were warranted to be treated as being very intelligent and very highbrow quality contributions. Then there was this man called Mumin Chaudhry. Now, Mumin Chaudhry I had seen him within the kind of premises of the University of Dhaka. What he was doing there, I didn't know. I only gathered from him that he was a lecturer. I don't know what department he was a lecturer in, but I think the account that he has given was that he was a lecturer in the politics department in the University of Dhaka. I was a student of the University of Dhaka economics department. So on that basis, I was in the arts faculty, which is situated in the place generally known as Neil Khath, which is not far from the New Market shopping area in Dhaka. Now, when I went to one of these meetings in Lehman Street and physically saw this man called Mumin Chaudhry, I didn't expect him because I didn't know that he lived in Tower Hamlets, and he didn't live in Tower Hamlets. But the astonishing thing that this criminal did was to describe the mainly Siloti Bangladeshis in the east end of London as coming from a very low background. Outrageous. Outrageous, full stop. So outrageous that I then confronted him after the meeting ended, as we were both leaving, with other people leaving as well. And he kind of denied that he was being defamatory and contemptuous of the Bangladeshis. And one man who came from the Biyanibazar area of Silot and who I have described before changed his name into, first of all, his name was without any title, either Chaudhry or Khan or whatever. His name was plain Abdul Razak. But then, to suit the Pakistani agenda, he called himself Abdul Razak Khan. And then, when Pakistan ended and Bangladesh became independent or a separate entity, he styled himself as Abdul Razak Chaudhry. Not only was he degenerating in that way nomenclature, he also was a convicted criminal. And the convicted criminal Abdul Razak was the one that took Mumin Chaudhry's side just before we left the actual building of the Lehman Street police station. At which point, Razak was actually physically animated to a point where people had to intervene to stop him and me making physical contact with one another, because he was absolutely violent in his animation, in his servile animation. And as I said, this man was known to be servile and animated and extremely excitable at the shortest, slightest of kind of invitation or provocations. So when I condemned Momin Chaudhry as being a mental slave, or the word's equivalent to that, it was Razak Chaudhry who leapt to his defense and challenged me, which left me hardly any option but to challenge him back and to reiterate the impact that the servile, mental slavish words of Abdul Mumin Chaudhry had on the reputation and the dignity of the people in the community. So that is the detail that I have just added again of the various points of servility, mental servility and stupidity that are exhibited by so-called Asian or African, let's say, recruits to the service of the UK state and its agencies. In this case, it was the London Metropolitan Police. Now, with that kind of contribution coming, Wallace would not be wrong to assume that there was no need to take any extra action against racist attacks because the police community liaison thing was set up in response to criticisms that had already surfaced 2 years, 3 years before the murder of Altawali by racists in May 1978. And the police, based at Lehman Street and the nearby buildings where they were for years, assumed that because of the or the success of the police community liaison gatherings, there was no issue concerning the threat from racists of attacks that were being raised by active members of the community, including myself. Now, that was in 76. So, this incident with Mumin Chaudhry and Abdur Razak took place sometime between whenever the gathering started in 76 up to not long before the murder, racist murder, on the 4th of May 1978 of Altawali in the Altawali Park, now called Altawali Park. It wasn't. It was known as the Ichi Park near the Aldgate East station. And the current location, the updated location is, this is the park opposite the Tesco shop in the Whitechapel High Street, which is not far from the junction of Osborne Street and Whitechapel High Street, London E1. And the racist murdering Altawali put an end to this liaison meeting chaired by the John Wallis, because obviously the racists murdering Altawali proved beyond any dispute the fact that the police were not protecting the potential and potentially targeted targets of the racist attacks. She'll be talking more about that meeting and the role of the police in Tower Hamlets in due course later. Suffice to say that there was nobody, there was absolutely no one who later became kind of listed as a local councillor, local this, that, and the other, at the expense of or the name of the Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets. Nobody there spoke to the actual issues, either about the policing as defined objectively internationally, or the interactions that took place in the ordinary street, in the ordinary kind of hours of the day between racists on the one hand and the unsuspecting kind of targets on the other hand. So I don't know where Wallis ended up later, but it was mentioned by several critics in publications that I have seen. I can't name all of them except one. The critics of the John Wallis kind of community liaison exercises. One of those critics was James Ryan. Now, James Ryan was a white man, left so called, whom I last saw in August 1977 during the demonstration that we both attended in Deptford in Lewisham. Deptford in Lewisham was the venue of the protest in August 1977 because the racist National Front So James Ryan was there in Deptford, as were a few other persons belonging to his faction called Worker Section. And during one of the activities held as part of the demonstration by the anti-racists, including myself and James Ryan, was a trip on the top of a truck that I took part in as the truck moved in some of these streets in Deptford. And one of the persons with a loud hailer on the top of that truck was a young person called Kim Gordon. And Kim Gordon loudly said the main slogan, while the others were hard echoing what his slogan demanded. And he said words to the effect that the police were the real racists. The police were the real muggers, because the National Front in those days was spreading the line that African origin, mainly African origin, Caribbean origin, black men were the muggers, and that they were mugging innocent white people. Kim Gordon was of mixed race. His father must have been African, either from Africa itself or from Caribbean. And his mother must have been white. So Kim Gordon pigmentationally looked almost white, because some mixed race children of mixed parentage look almost white depending. So Kim Gordon very strongly and repeatedly shouted the slogan, "Police are the real muggers," to which the people on the back of the trucks echoed, "Police are the real muggers." That was in August 1977. So what I'm saying here is that Louis Casey obviously has not heard of protests like that, or heard of slogans like that that were mouthed or uttered by the likes of Kim Gordon. And in the period 1977, the 77 to 87, 97, 2007, 2017, and this is now 46 years later, degeneration of the London police has been taking place at every encounter. So the word decline used by Patrick Cockburn is completely factually untrue. But that also shows that Patrick Cockburn himself is not as familiar with the real targeting by the Metropolitan Police of black people, African people as well. And so therefore the reaction, I haven't heard or seen any response so far anyway to the Louis Casey review by anyone that I can recognize as being part of the anti-racist campaign about policing in this country or in London. I mean, I took part in February 1984 as a member of the community group called the the community group that I'm chair of now and the chief executive of, honorary chief executive of Tower Hamlets Race Equality in Tower Hamlets. But in February 1984, I was not chair. I was a member of that group. And a woman came to one of our meetings and introduced herself as a teacher in a local school, St. Paul's. And the woman was of Jamaican background, and she alleged that she had been arrested by the police when she went to the nearest whatever post office she went to at those in those days to cash or withdraw the money that she was entitled to withdraw under child benefit. Now, the role I played in subsequent campaign, drawing attention to that incident and the trauma that this woman claimed she had suffered, was part of the thing, the evidence of the operation of racism by the London police. So that was in February 1984. Now, when Patrick Coburn says decline of the Metropolitan Police indicative of degradation of British state, he obviously doesn't say that based on information that I was witnessing, I was part of, if you like. And then the rest of the column, the piece ends, the Patrick Coburn column ends with the paragraph that I shall read aloud. The decline of the Metropolitan Police into a messy version of American police culture is ongoing. Braverman, the UK Interior Minister, also known as the Secretary of State for the Home Office or Home Department, Braverman evidently sees no problem in the process since her rhetorical flings mostly come straight out of the playbook of the Republican Party in the US, with its unswerving support for militarized policing. US warrior culture cannot be transferred wholesale to the United Kingdom, but enough of it is here already to make sure that any modern day equivalent of the Muriel spark on a foggy night at Euston Station is unlikely to accept a policeman's offer to escort her home. Now, what Muriel Spark reference is doing here in the piece by Patrick Coburn is a reference to the novelist, the late Muriel Spark, and her autobiography, in which she described her arriving at Euston from Scotland on a foggy night. And because of the fog, there was no transport. That is, buses had been absent, etc., and there was hardly any availability of taxis. And she saw a lone policeman through the thick fog, and she identified him with his torchlight that was just about flickering through the night. And she wondered how to get home, and she gave him her location. And without much ado, that policeman picked up her suitcase and matter of factly said, "Let's go." And he went all the way from Euston to Lancaster Gate carrying Muriel Sparks' suitcase with no problem. Now, that is a very rare moment that actually contradicts the behavior of the police as typified, evident in the behavior of David Carrick, and before him, the behavior of Wayne Couzens. Couzens is the one who kidnapped and raped, murdered, and burned the body of Sarah Everard. Now, the contrast between that policeman that Muriel Spark described in 1944 and the behavior of Wayne Couzens. It's not the contrast, just one off contrast to two single incidents. The decline of the police as a reliable, friendly source of support and protection and safety into the deadly organization of criminals has been happening in front of our eyes. While this has been happening, the UK Parliament has been willfully unaware. The UK government have been not only aware, but have been encouraging the police degenerating into the force of a gang of criminals. And Patrick Coburn is also wrong about American warrior military police coming here. It has been happening with domestic incentive and spur. When the 1980s confrontation between the mine workers and the government took place, Margaret Thatcher, as has been chronicled quite extensively, ordered the police in the mid 1980s to go and attack the protesting mine workers. So it wasn't anything to do with the American kind of model or culture. It is very much British grown. And so there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples of police openly practicing the crafts of criminals, even going to the extent of attacking many of the victims. For example, as has been recalled and recounted by more than one victim, the white young women who complained to the police and were targeted by the police instead, about the Pakistani origin gang of Asian sex criminals that targeted young white girls for gang rapes, prostitution, and so on. So the decline of the police, as Patrick Coburn's heading says, is completely misleading, because the decline has not just happened in the London Metropolitan Police, but it has happened in Yorkshire, right across Yorkshire and other parts of England, where organized criminals have been targeting vulnerable young women, brainwashing them, grooming them, having illegal, unauthorized, unwarranted sex with them, and having raping them, and also selling them as prostitutes. And each of the local area where this has been happening has had complicit elected councillors, complicit elected councils, complicit elected members of parliament who have maintained deafening silence for years and years and years. And no party, either Conservative Party or the Labour Party or the Lib Dems, has taken one single step at any platform, either in the House of Commons or anywhere else politically or on any of the media, to first of all admit that this was going on, and secondly, that this must stop, and thirdly, that the fact that it was happening with the police complicit with the criminals shows that there is no policing. So Patrick Coburn may be a writer on the I newspaper, but he is completely behind, almost 200 years behind the actual facts and the evidence. Now I'm looking at the Sun on Sunday front page, which reads, Amir, my gun raid terror. Wife feared they would both die. Now this happened in London. Amir Khan was so scared, terrified at gunpoint, that he handed over his expensive watch. Let's see what the watch is called. Boxer Amir Khan has told of his gun robbery terror and said, I feared my kids would grow up without their dad. The former world champion, 36, handed over his £72,000 watch at gunpoint in London. Wife Faryal, who was with him, said, I thought we were both going to die. Now, this happened in London, according to the Sun on Sunday today, the 26th of. This is Amir. And I've just shown a flip. This is Amir, my gun raid terror. So on page 5, let's see what it says. So this is pages 4 and 5. These 2 pages spread on the So what it is saying there is that I didn't want to see the bullet. Amir turned away from gun. I don't feel safe in UK now. Exclusive moment, radar pointed barrel at star. So this is the story. Robbery victim Amir Khan revealed last night how he turned his head in terror during his gunpoint ordeal so he would not see the bullet coming. The boxer had left a restaurant with wife Faryal when a gang pulled up in a Mercedes, pointed the weapon in his face, and demanded his watch. Amir's light welterweight reflexes kicked in as he feared the gunman would pull the trigger. Speaking exclusively to the Sun on Sunday, he revealed, in that moment, you think the worst, that the kids could be growing up without their dad, that Faryal would be raising them on her own. Your life flashes before your eyes. I lent my head to the right because I thought if he's going to shoot me, he can shoot the side of my head. I don't want to see the bullet coming. Ami, 36, handed over the 72,000 diamond encrusted watch he had bought to celebrate winning a fight. Terrified Faryal, 31, ran into the road and screamed for help. The robbers fled in their car, and the timepiece has not been found. Faryal yesterday said she feared the couple were the target of an organized hit, saying, I thought we were going to die on the spot. The couple now feel the England we love isn't a safe place anymore. So spend more time in their home in Dubai, etc., etc. So This is the kind of evidence, well, that is of course dramatically presented because Amir Khan is a known boxer and so on, but ordinary policing contact and experience of ordinary people is not that dramatic. Most people, most people in society now conclude and openly conclude that, for example, the women, like the presenter, television presenter, Susanna Reid reportedly said that if she got raped or if she got attacked, she won't report the crime to the police because she is more afraid of the police than of the criminal who raped her or would rape her, would be rapist. This is not the subject of a review. This should not be the subject of a review. This should be the state of lack of policing in society should be the cause for revolutionary action to create proper policing in society, both for London, for the rest of the country. And there are other incidents of the police, and the fact that the police don't do the right things is the norm. Police do the wrong things, the crime things. They don't do the right thing, they do the crime things. We shall be talking again on these because there are so many examples in due course. Now, let's check quickly what is happening on the other topics. There is a line that is being run in Pakistan saying that Imran Khan is promising Islamic utopia to Pakistan, which means that they say that this will mean that the military rule would return to Pakistan. So that is a line that we shall explore, examine later in another part, not in this edition. And let's check on the story. So there is a piece in the Revolutionary Communist Group, and it says Shamima Begum versus the racist state. Shamima Begum is one of the many women with their citizenship revoked by Britain and trapped in dangerous areas of conflict in the Middle East. This is shown as having been posted a day ago, that is on Saturday. So this is apparently written by somebody called Annie O'Connor and posted at 14:10 hours on the Saturday, the 25th of March 2023. And it says on 22nd of February 2023, Shamima Begum lost her appeal to the Special Immigration Appeals Commission, SIAC, against the 2019 decision to remove her British citizenship. And the next sentence is Begum was trafficked to Syria in 2015, aged just 15, and for the last 4 years has been engaged in a bitter battle against the revocation of her citizenship and for the right to return home to Britain. This is the latest in a success of adverse judgments. It's not success, it should be succession of adverse judgment in our case. In 2021, the Supreme Court, England Supreme Court, upheld the refusal by the Home Secretary, that is Priti Patel, to allow her to enter Britain in order to participate in the SIAC proceedings. These rulings illustrate the abject racism of the British state and the intensifying brutality of Britain's racist immigration system. Any O'Connor reports. Now, the spelling of O'Connor is done in different ways in the heading and in this piece. This is where it is correctly spelled. O apostrophe Connor, CONNOR reports. Begum was trafficked from East London with two other teenage schoolgirls. Amira, repeat the wrong spelling, Abbas. It's Abbasi. And Khadija Sultana, that is also incorrect. But anyway, this is a piece by this website that is doing less corrupt covering of what is happening around Shamim Begum. And this is the first piece that I have seen that is talking about the racist state. So we shall be talking about the racist state and the implication of this statement in another edition. And there is nothing, I don't believe that this Annie O'Connor knows any more really than what is available on the internet, which is repeating a packaged set of narratives around Shamima Begum. So she would not be talking about the things that we alone have been talking about and highlighting for the past years, which is that the local Town Council has been legally neglecting, let's put it this way, legally obliged to have looked after these children and safeguard them from radicalization, whatever, then the council has failed and has been failing since. What is called safeguarding children duties. And if safeguarding children duties being neglected by the local Tower Hamlets Council that covers Shamima Begum's home area of Bethnal Green, then it has to be added that Tower Hamlets Council has also been neglecting other duties. Other duties it has owed and it still continues to owe to other people of other age and ability and health kind of categories, needing and vulnerability, needing help and safeguarding by the local council, which receives significant amounts of money under that heading from the central government. And the cases of the children, a group of children, orphans, both parents died, and those children were betrayed by Tower Hamlets Council, which still is continuing to betray them after the children cease to be children anymore, but their entire childhoods were destroyed by the Tower Hamlets Council neglecting them while they were being exploited intensely by somebody the council knew was involved in their exploitation. And the council refused to do anything to protect those children. those children are suffering from various degrees of trauma and distress, which will haunt them for the rest of their lives. The Term-Limits Council is, of course, the one that has been lumbered with the post of the elected mayor, which is a corrupt and corrupting post. Now, when you have got a corrupting post being given to a corrupt individual, what do you expect? But all these layers of corruption in Term-Limits Council, all these layers of corruption have been caused not entirely by each individual I'm going to name again, but in parts. Ken Langston Livingston, Keith Sleaze Vaz, George Git Galloway. These are three of the names that I can mention, but there are other names that can be mentioned. These three individuals were on the platform at the Term-Limits Council controlled building called the Brady Center in the Henbury Street on Saturday, the 6th of February, 2010. Now, if you look at the date, 6th of February 2010 was March, April, May, 3 months before the actual referendum date, when the referendum on the question whether Term-Limits Council or whether Term-Limits voters wanted the system of government, local government, the council government, the form of council administration, to change from being a leader-led council with a cabinet to a single individual occupying the post of executive mayor. And those three criminals, Ken Livingston, George Git Galloway, and Keith Sleaze Vaz, were hired to give or lend their notoriety as current MP, which is what Sleaze Vaz was on the 6th of February 2010, or former members of parliament, Ken Langston Livingston and George Git Galloway, who was just about an existing current sitting member of parliament, but he soon lost that on that day, the day of the referendum. I was outside the Brady Center addressing the gathering that was supposedly anti the mayor system. And I was carrying the loudhailer when George Galloway approached me with a very firm demand that I should give him the loudhailer so that he could address the gathering. Now, what George Galloway didn't understand was that I may have looked normal, if you like, amenable, but there was no way that I was going to give the loudhailer to him ever. He was a supporter of the crooks, corrupt system, and I was the emphatic opponent of that. How the fuck did the idiot expect me to give him the loudhailer? So I didn't give him the loudhailer, but they went on and they told the people gathered inside the Brady Center that, and that was months before the referendum outcome was published or known. And at that point, nobody could say that the yes for mayor would succeed. And yet they assumed that it was going to succeed. And they said, especially Sleaze was, that according to them, Lutfur Rahman was the best candidate for the mayor. Now, of course, Lutfur Rahman was not the best candidate. Nobody was the best candidate. The whole post was the worst possible post. So we shall be updating on all of those in due course. This is 1 hour, 30 minutes, and 55 seconds when we shall be ending this particular broadcast. Part B